A failed product launch rarely happens because of a poor marketing campaign. It happens because a company treats geographic expansion like a creative exercise, right up until the millions deployed in upfront capital catch fire. Go-to-market, or GTM, is not a launch event. It is a rigorous, capital-intensive exercise in deploying corporate resources to secure new revenue. Every attempt to enter a new space requires pulling market share away from an existing player. This makes expansion a live game theory scenario, where anticipating the incumbent's retaliation is a mandatory requirement for survival. To eliminate the fatal risks of expansion, professional strategists rely on mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive frameworks. Without a mathematical and strategic bedrock to guide those decisions, market entry is indistinguishable from gambling with a corporate treasury. This dashboard shows our two primary architectural tools, the 4-pillar market entry matrix and the Ansoff growth grid. We will construct these from first principles, testing them against real market data from Amazon, Netflix, and a Middle Eastern e-commerce platform. The 4-pillar framework has a very specific function. It calculates the exact mechanics of where and how a business should establish its footprint. The Ansoff grid solves a different variable: how to prioritize new revenue streams the moment your current engines begin to slow. Mastering the interplay between these two diagnostic models provides the complete strategic map needed to scale any operation. This structure maps our first two variables, market attractiveness and competitive landscape. We define attractiveness strictly by the math: population size, current penetration, and average spend. The diagnostic rule of thumb here is alignment. You calculate the market size top-down and then sanity check it against bottom-up unit economics. If achievable volume and individual unit margins disagree by an order of magnitude, the entry model is flawed. We can pressure test this logic using Amazon's 2013 entry into the Indian market. In 2012, India's e-commerce baseline was relatively small, estimated at $2 to $3 billion. However, the top-down forecast projected an explosive surge, driven entirely by rising smartphone and internet penetration. But Pillar 2, the competitive reality, presented a massive barrier. Flipkart, founded by two ex-Amazon employees, already had a 6-year head start and a highly optimized local moat. Raw market attractiveness is functionally useless if an entering company lacks the operational mechanics to survive the incumbent's entrenched geographic advantage. This brings us to Pillars 3 and 4, client capability and entry mode. You have to prove a quantifiable right to win. Amazon assessed its specific capabilities against Flipkart. While Flipkart held the geographic advantage, Amazon possessed a vastly superior supply chain technology and virtually infinite capital availability. Based on those assets, Amazon selected their entry mode. Rather than acquiring a local player or forming a joint venture, they committed to an organic build, launching a completely new marketplace from a standing start. Building organically requires a highly specific trade-off. It optimizes for total control over the resulting ecosystem, but guarantees an exceptionally long payback period on the initial capital deployed. Amazon's immense capital reserves allowed them to intentionally absorb the slowest, most expensive entry mode in exchange for absolute, long-term operational control. The entire market entry framework relies on an aggressive growth posture, but that posture changes the moment a company's core domestic engine approaches saturation. This Ansoff matrix provides the map for reprioritization. It categorizes growth options by intersecting existing or new products with existing or new markets. When the bottom left quadrant, market penetration, reaches its ceiling, the shrinking runway forces the conversation upward into new territory. Netflix's expansion through the 2010s demonstrates exactly how to execute this shift. As their US penetration saturated, they had to systematically test the other quadrants. Netflix held a distinct capability, a portable core product. Their underlying technology, on-demand streaming, recommendation algorithms, and subscription billing, was directly transferable across borders. Because this core product did not need to be reinvented, market development became the mathematically logical path, offering far lower risk than moving into the diversification quadrant with unrelated services. A shift in corporate strategy is rarely arbitrary. It is a forced response to domestic saturation, and the direction of that shift is dictated entirely by the portability of existing assets. Netflix applied a sequenced execution strategy, choosing to enter culturally and geographically close markets, like Canada, first. This sequencing served a rigid operational purpose. It allowed Netflix to build a repeatable international playbook, testing their billing infrastructure and localization workflows in a low-friction environment. Perfecting those internal processes de-risked their subsequent rollouts into heavily censored regions or distinct cultural markets like Japan. Moving rightward into product development is the required path for a company that dominates its current market but needs to launch an entirely new service. Consider an e-commerce platform operating in the Middle East. They control 50% of a $10 billion market. To extract further growth, they initiated a GTM pivot, developing a fintech payments wallet to capture more value from the transactions already happening on their platform. In this quadrant, their primary advantage is customer acquisition. They bypass the hardest hurdle of a new product launch because the target user base is already captured within their ecosystem. Product development is the lever monopolies pull to weaponize an existing audience, allowing them to rapidly scale adjacent technologies. But an adjacent launch requires mapping the new service against a strict value chain flowchart. For the e-commerce giant entering fintech, the primary barrier to entry is entirely regulatory. Securing merchant acquisition and passing compliance checks for financial products operates under completely different mechanical rules than moving retail goods through a warehouse. Owning a massive customer acquisition channel yields zero return if a company fails to calculate the operational and legal friction of a new value chain. This unified schematic shows how a company's internal capabilities, its right to win, directs the exact path it must take to secure new growth. A successful go-to-market strategy is never a vague directive to innovate or expand internationally. Every entry is contingent on a demonstrable advantage. Whether you leverage deep brand equity, transferable streaming technology, or sheer capital dominance, the right to win must be quantifiable. The ultimate diagnostic reality is resource constraint. Every GTM calculation operates under a finite limit of corporate capital, management bandwidth, and time. These frameworks do not exist to generate a list of creative ideas. They are mathematical tools designed to force prioritization, calculate the cost of trade-offs, and engineer long-term corporate survival.